scientific futurist view of the day that you would be able to take, in essence, make infinite amount of copies of the initial identity being put forth into duplicate, triplicate, quadruplicate identities. So many people in watching the news over the last probably 6, 7, 8 years have noticed that you always seem to see different versions of the same political figure. Now, as this QCast is being broadcast today, we're talking to different people beyond the realm of normal public awareness that are all coming in and saying, here's what I know, here's what I know. I've been trying to confirm the large presence of Russians in Antarctica. There are rumors, and according to 2 different sources, a lot of women are being brought into the Antarctic because it appears that somebody is getting ready and bracing for some pretty major devastation in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've been watching Drudge. We've been seeing all the different postings. I've been posting all the stories on stevequayle.com of the bunkers for billionaires. The yachts are all in foreign ports. A lot of people are bailing out to New Zealand. A lot of people are buying $1 to $5 million condos in different bomb shelter communities around the world. And for the average guy, I just want to bring this up right now. On my website, stevequayle.com, over on the right side is my Ozark homestead. And the average person can find a place to live and have bunker space for a family of 4 for right around $60,000. I've been in the preparation business and have been one of the founders of it from 35 years ago. And I can tell you this, when you have a community where you can buy an actual, and these are small homes, but to have the bunker space, if you go out and try and build a bunker with the correct filtration, the correct shielding factor for radiation, the filtration system, the carbon monoxide exhalation, blast valves, entrance, blast doors, and everything, you can put a lot of money into them. Even a 4-person shelter can, depending on the sophistication and backup power, etc., can go into $100,000. But I want you to go again on Steve Quayle, my website, stevequayle.com, and look at my Ozark homestead. It's over on the right-hand side, and consider getting in contact with those folks. It's in Missouri. It's probably the best thought out, and I would say this, affordable shelter community in the United States. You know, somebody said, tell me everything you know. And my answer to those people is no way. You're not being faithful with what I have told you. But in this case, those that have ears to hear, eyes to see, will understand that the situation in this country is becoming more problematic. The headlines, the double crossing, the news today. Now, this all has to do with Antarctica. The news today of the rhinos, Republicans in name only, such as John McCain and the others who have been receiving money from George Soros, Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House. There's 6 different people that are very prominent Republicans that are coming to Lindsey Graham, that are being exposed, Mark Rubio, for taking money from the Soros Foundation. Now, let me share this. That's like a vampire. It's like Dracula offering to a kid, I'll give you a 5-pound Hershey's bar, which, by the way, that's not the best chocolate, in my opinion, but you just give me 4 pints of your blood. In essence, ladies and gentlemen, there's a price when you sell out your country. There's a price when you take money from someone who is absolutely bent on destroying the very nation that you are hired by its citizens to represent. Nothing of the truth will ever come out by the official sources. So what we have to do is we have to go to ancillary information. We have to go to people that know what's going on, and we have to get to that place where their testimony is being prompted by, I believe, the living God, by conscience, by guilt, or by sheer panic. There's obviously other motivations for people telling the truth. But in this day and age, with the preponderance of evidence of what truly is going on in the Antarctic, you got to understand, It's not what you see above ground. It's not even what you see in the ice flows, the ice fields, or the buildings above the ice. The different stations from different parts of Antarctica, the Norwegians at Troll, the McMurdo base, all of these different bases have a purpose, but the real purpose is under the ice. Not only the empire beneath the ice, but the world kingdoms of this world are responsible primarily to one entity. And whether you are a Christian or you're a non-believer or believe that none of this stuff is relevant, it's very relevant from the standpoint of this. If someone is trying to hide their presence and to control and dictate the future narrative to basically manipulate you, to be able to control you, to be able to deceive you, and ultimately to be able to destroy you, I'd say it becomes pretty problematic that this is an important subject matter. And simply stated, just as there seems to be an over attention by the West to Antarctica, in the Arctic, the Russians are doing a marvelous job of reestablishing all their bases. I believe they either have 4 nuclear icebreakers, and they're working on 2 more. 4 and 2 is 6, and these are fabulously big icebreakers. It's not like the ones you've seen in the old day newsreels. So there's an intense interest coming to both poles, and as the natural resources that are present in both the Arctic and Antarctic become a very interesting and lucrative financially, whether it's gas, oil exploration, whatever it's going to be, different forms or new minerals. In the Antarctic, everything seems to be centering around ancient energy fields, ancient energy sources. Years ago, and I started on talk radio 23 years ago as a host, doing 3 hours a day. Thank God that I was able to get Hawk to take that over. But we're now in a position that news breaks so fast, so furious, and so ominously, in my opinion, that it's important that these updates go out. We are hearing rumors today that, again, for the record, this is February 3rd, 2017, of massive intelligence presence by different nations and different intelligence agencies, as if they're scouting the land to prepare for whoever's coming. Now, I would like to think that it's not a permanent issue, it's a visiting issue to get clued in. And one person sent me an email yesterday or the day before, and he said, Steve, have you noticed that Gog and Magog? He said, have you ever put that into perspective? Now, let me share my perspective on Gog and Magog. It's a little different. Obviously, I know Ezekiel. I know the prophecies. But there's a reason why the city of London chose Gog and Magog, 2 literal giants in history, especially in British Isle lore, to be the patron saints of that whole country within a country. And for those of you who don't understand, the city of London is like the Vatican City. It's its own country, has its own abilities, capabilities, etc. He said, have you considered that Gog and Magog could the armies coming from the north and the south and converging in the middle, could be those, if you will, hidden, and I never thought of this, he did, thank you brother, I won't use your name, those hidden armies that are both under the ice in the Arctic and Antarctic. Remember, Admiral Byrd said that the flying craft could fly from one pole to the other in a matter of minutes. Well, every day we're having new revelations. We're having new confirmations. We're having new information. I made the statement, too. I want to clarify something. One guy said, Steve, I couldn't find on Google Maps anything that showed 9 satellite dishes in Antarctica. My answer to that is simply, and I asked my source, I said, how can that be covered up? He said, it's so simple. He said, remember, you're dealing with the most sophisticated electronics in the world. And then I might add, or out of the world. And so it's very easy to fake. You know, you've seen it. When a thief breaks into, let's say, a hallway, and the hallway's got a video camera, what they do is they take basically just background video, and they keep looping it and playing it. So anybody watching the video monitor just sees the same thing over and over. We've seen that again on specific areas in the Google Maps of different areas around the world. We've seen it on the moon. We've seen it in some of the planets, and we're definitely seeing it in a big and major way right now when there's a area of interest that needs to be blocked out, i.e. the Antarctica. So that was the answer that my engineer friend gave to me. And I shouldn't have called him so early in the morning. I forget that most people sleep. And I'm sorry. And by the way, if that ever happens, my apologies ahead of time. When I get a thought in my head, I am so determined to get to the bottom of the information source that I lose track of time. As a matter of fact, we were just setting up this podcast out at our studio, and all three of us, Tim Alberino, Carlos, and myself, none of us knew the date until one pulled out his iPhone and looked. As an aside, when you've got eyewitness testimony upon testimony upon testimony that these events have taken place that we're talking about in the Antarctica, when you have people who were the first Secretary of Defense was murdered, again, Forrestal thrown out the third-story Bethesda Naval Hospital window, when you get cover-up, cover-overs, and denials, and then the day comes when all those cover-ups, cover-overs, and denials no longer satisfy the curious or the inquiring mind, we all have got to answer or ask the question and hopefully get an answer. There's someone spinning or waiting to spin the history, the events that are taking place, and then you have to come up with, okay, why would they do this? Just as Jesus said that the love of money, not money, but the love of money is the root of all evil. Some of you have heard me say on talk radio over the years that obviously the control of money is control of all evil. It didn't seem to me that unusual that when the Pentagon and the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, I think they were trying to account for, $16 trillion that had disappeared? 16 trillion with a T? Oh, and by the way, how much is our national debt today? Officially 20 trillion? My estimate, and guys who are smarter than I am, are saying the true debt of the United States and future obligations and things that are off budget could be in the neighborhood of 200 trillion. Then take the derivative market. And I remember this. I remember when everyone was trying to calculate the derivative market exposure. That's basically IOUs upon IOUs upon we owe thems upon they owe us's. There's a great instantaneous definition of derivatives. But I said, and I remember saying this so many years ago, a lot of you who have followed me over the years would know, I said the derivatives issue is a $250 billion exposure, $2 quadrillion. Well, most people can't relate to $2 quadrillion. Most people can't relate to $1 trillion. And $1 trillion is 1,000 billion, and obviously $1 quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. And we just were told that Bill Gates may be the first trillionaire. That's the most famous trillionaire, but there are plenty of trillionaires, and whether you're dealing with the Rothschild dynasty or the Rockefeller dynasty or some of the ancient Oriental dynasties that most people don't even know exist. So again, I want to say it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. It's not what's necessarily on top of the earth or on top of the ice. You got to go beneath that. And so it's my goal, and I would challenge every one of those of you that is in the know on this to make it known. Fascinating. I went into my store. I'm always in motion to check on my computer emails, and I got an email from an intercessor, and God has been showing her the giant doors, and she kept saying, Lord, Lord, what are these giant doors? Now, some of them were in the Seattle area, and today she sent me an email out of the blue just saying, in my time of prayer, she said, I couldn't escape it. The Lord kept saying to me multiple times, the Lord Jesus Christ, giants, giants, giants. Now, one of the things that's fascinating is that throughout the world, there are portals, there are gates, there are specific areas defined as stargates, defined as angel gates, defined as portals, time tunnels. There's so many different names for them. And if you remember back to the Norwegian spiral at the time, Barack Obama, I think his first term of being the president, the amount of spirals associated with high energy beams kind of pulse throughout the world. And if you draw a spiral, kind of like, you'd think of a spiral galaxy, you'd always come to the same conclusion that something is being sucked in. Well, a lot of other particles, or let's just say light, is being spun out. It's just like watching a drain, Coriolis effect. The purpose today of this podcast is to challenge those of you in the know. And please, obviously, my email's not the best way to get a hold of me. Go to a third party and tell them what you need. And for the record, I never ask anybody's name. All I look for is information that can validate other information that I don't make public. That goes back to my statement. It's important, and both L.A. Marzulli and I were talking about this, it's important that we don't get feedback loops on our own stuff. So the point is that as more and more people are coming forth, breaking forth,
Throw that junk.
The relative importance, the total importance of Jesus Christ, the world has been able to absolutely rob the warnings that God has placed in the scriptures for these days. One of the things that's interesting, too, Jesus said that if the people didn't praise him, the stones would cry out. Most people, Doug, forget that. But right now, we're on the trail in True Legends, and we're on the trail, we believe, because the Lord has led us this way, following up on the work of David Flynn and the late and amazing David Flynn. So many times I've asked the Lord, couldn't you just have left him around a little longer? But it seems like God had called David home because his work was finished for that time in history. And so as we talk tonight about certain words, geoglyphs, meaning images, meaning maps, meaning lines that are more than lines that have been inscribed into the earth, usually from an aerial perspective, and some of these lines go so deep into bedrock and andesite and granite that there's no human way that somebody sat there and chiseled it out with a copper chisel. You know, Doug, the reason why this is critical tonight is because God's people won't acknowledge the realm of the supernatural warfare that's against them. They'll quote Ephesians 6 until they're blue in the face, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, spiritual wickedness, and heavenly places. But when God says, woe, 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 so many times that word woe is absolutely, I would say, set aside because people don't understand. So let me tell everybody what woe means. It means misery. It means great sorrow and distress, unhappiness, heartache, heartbreak, despondency, despair, depression, regret, gloom, melancholy. And what all those words basically are talking about is what happens when the devil is thrown out of heaven onto the earth. Now, obviously, at some point, he still had access into one of the heavens, and the scripture says that his place was no longer found in heaven. So the idea that Satan is literally coming to earth to basically embody an entity, what was once a human, and to set up his rule and reign, you can't ask for a more prodigious amount of headlines pointing that we're there now. I can remember being saved in 1972, accepting Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and even in those days they were talking about the day the dollar dies. Well, those people were almost a whole generation ahead of their time. Willard Cantillon, Mary Stuart Ralphie, and others. But now we're at a point, Doug, where the war is absolutely getting ready to take place on the earth. When Daniel was commanded by the angel to seal it up, Daniel, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, for knowledge shall run to and fro, that's the time we live in now, where the sealing and the unsealing is coming to pass. So tonight we're going to talk about the importance of the finds that we're tracking down worldwide that point to a universal fallen angel language that is so beyond a two-dimensional or even three-dimensional understanding. In other words, imagine if you see the surface of the earth and then you've seen computer projections where they not only turn it sideways, but they'll turn it and reflect itself. That's kind of how they take pictures of the dark side of the moon and also the dark side of the sun. So, well, things have been hidden and hidden from the public's eyes. The church, Doug, and I'm talking about those who call themselves by the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, the reason there are so many demonized people is because the church won't walk in its authority. Now, not a day goes by that phone calls don't flood my answering machine or emails don't come into me. There are a lot of desperate people, and these people love Jesus as much as the people that maybe think they're a little off or something. So now that we're at war, we believe that it's God's time and that He's leading us each step of the way. So True Legends, the documentary that we just produced, and by the way, it is done now. That's only one of 9, hopefully 12. And what's been phenomenal is that as we've gone onto this project and into this project, it seems like every new day brings a new twist, turn, and revelation. So what we're going to talk tonight primarily about is we've already talked about Peru, why it's important, all that, but we're going to talk about geoglyphs. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Tim, because, again, all of the geoglyphs that we have been downloading, that you've been downloading from Google, to the point that some of them even match the Incan rope language of the hierarchy of the Incans, the kings and the priests. Now, isn't it fascinating that somebody says, well, what's all this stuff with just a bunch of strings? So, Tim, explain, if you will, what Quipu is, and then explain how, the overlays of the Quipu with some of the geoglyphs seems to be an exact representation. And one of the brightest men I know, Rich, who's working on this for us, he's absolutely convinced that it is a quadra-dimensional language. Now, I'll explain that a little bit as I'm able, but primarily here's the story, Doug. Everything that's happened in creation up until and forward from God's judgment, prior to God's judgment, prior to man being created, I put up on my website today the map of the Creator from Bashkir. It's 120 million years old. They've actually matched satellite photographs of the Earth to that. Well, how can you reconcile those things to the Word of God? Well, the past is being intentionally manipulated and kept from us in order that the grandest deception of all time can be kept from the people of God. And so God's Word says that His people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. This is probably the most relevant thing, because salvation, people don't even understand that the Scripture defines the purpose for Jesus coming to earth. For this purpose was the Son of God manifested, that He might destroy the works of the evil one. Now, very seldom, and I would say this, I can't say with total knowledge, but very seldom in all of the things I've heard and read will anybody deal with that subject. Because the thing that God's people don't want to have to do is face evil and overcome it through the blood of the Lamb. They'd rather run from it, and if that's not convenient, deny it. Go ahead, Tim, and explain kind of how the unfolding revelation of the geoglyphs is kind of changing everything and absolutely propelling us into the next stage of our documentary.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. The geoglyphs are a sequence of interlocking shapes, rectangles, circles. There's raised mounds that can only be seen from a satellite perspective over the Earth. David Flynn, as Steve said, discovered these geoglyphs right after the technology was just beginning to come online to be able to see the Earth in high definition from the satellites in 2008, or previous to 2008. In 2008, David wrote an article concerning the geoglyphs called "Discovery of Vast Prehistoric Works Built by Giants, ? The Geoglyphs of Tiwanaku." So for those who are completely clueless as to what we're talking about here, David was viewing satellite images primarily over Bolivia, right around the Lake Titicaca area. Bolivia and Peru border one another, and they share the same region around the borders of Lake Titicaca, which is called the Altiplano, which stretches all the way down into Argentina, and part of it goes into Chile as well. So David was viewing this general area in South America from satellite images, and he discovered these geoglyphs. And just so everybody knows right off the bat, as Steve said, our documentary, the first episode in our documentary series, True Legends, the first episode is called Technology of the Fallen. It is available right now for not only to purchase the DVD on Steve's website, but also you can rent it on Vimeo. And we can talk more about that after we're done dealing with the geoglyphs. But the geoglyphs are, as I said, they're interlocking shapes. And what I wanted to say was these are in our documentary. It's going to be confusing for people because it's very hard to describe these things. They're so bizarre. They're so alien. Doug, I know you saw the documentary. It's very hard to describe it. I mean, it's really astounding when you really take a look at some of the high-res images that we have in our documentary. So everything we're talking about right now, you can go rent the documentary, purchase the DVD, and you will see it. You'll have a visual representation of exactly what we're talking about. So what we have is what Steve and I believe is very possibly a language literally inscribed on the surface of the Earth. And that's what David also believed that these geoglyphs represented. And as Steve said, these geoglyphs are carved into the bedrock of the Earth in some cases. They're very, very ancient. They're thousands of years old, carved into the bedrock of the Earth. They're faded in many cases, but they're also comprised of raised mounds and raised lines. And they're not just horizontal lines like terraces. They're also vertical lines. In fact, the lines go in all different directions like a web. And again, it's very difficult to describe in words what these geoglyphs look like. However, the interesting thing about this is that, as Steve mentioned, the Inca had a system of communication called quipus. Quipus was their form of a written language, was the Inca's form of a written language, which was comprised of rope, and it was knotted rope and ropes of different colors. And the Inca could inscribe incredibly complex data using this system of knotted ropes. In fact, they could have histories of their wars and of their genealogies and of their kings in a very small length of rope with a bunch of knots in it. It's called quipus. And the conquistadors were even astounded at how much information could be conveyed using the Inca quipus. So again, that's also in our documentary. We break that down. We show you what it is. So when you look at these images, these satellite images over Tiwanaku, the whole Bolivia, most of Bolivia, in fact. And if you go to Google Earth, you look over around Lake Titicaca, you pan over to Bolivia. You can start looking right around Tiwanaku, the town of Tiwanaku, where the ruins are, where Pumapunku is, and you'll begin to see these very alien-looking shapes. And basically they've been written off as farming terraces or some kind of ancient farming practice. But when you begin to zoom out and you see how vast these things are, they run for hundreds of miles all over the Altiplano. The size, the scope of these things is mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. The amount of sheer manpower that it would have required to construct these things, because again, these are raised mounds, they're raised lines that are built up with earth, and then there are also lines that are carved into the bedrock. It's just a absolutely monumental work. that somebody inscribed into the earth. Now, many people are familiar with the Nazca lines. The Nazca lines, just to give people a reference, the Nazca lines are those famous characters that are carved into the earth around Nazca, Peru. There's a monkey, there's birds, there's different shapes that are carved into the ground there. Very famous. Those things are nothing compared to the geoglyphs in Bolivia and around Lake Titicaca in Peru. They're nothing in terms of scale, in terms of the complexity. That's child's play compared to what we're looking at in the documentary, and what David Flynn discovered and wrote about again in an article on February 24th, 2008. And so, again, we believe that what we're looking at is literally a language imprinted on the surface of the earth. And if you look at quipus, which is, again, the system that the Inca used to communicate written language using knotted rope, there's also a mathematical system that went along with quipus. And to be honest with you, the name of that mathematical system escapes me right now. But it was the Incas' form of, that's the way they made their calculations, which they would have these almost like checkered boxes, like a checkers board or a chess board, and it would be raised boxes. In other words, the outer perimeters of these rectangles and squares would be raised off of the board, and the Inca would place little pebbles inside of each cube, inside of each square or rectangle, and they would use this as a system of calculating sums. And together with quipus, that represented their mathematics, the way that they reckoned their mathematics, and their written language. Well, if you take those two systems of writing, of communication, of written communication, put them together, what you literally have are the geoglyphs of Tiwanaku. That is precisely what you have when you look at these geoglyphs from the satellite images on Google Earth. When you're looking down at them, you have the same rectangular boxes, the same square boxes with the raised mounds inside of them in certain areas. Some of them have raised mounds, some of them don't, some of them have multiple raised mounds, some of them only have one, just like the Inca system of calculation. And then you have the lines running both horizontally and vertically that are very akin to quipus. So what we postulate, and what David postulated in his article, and partly why we went to Peru was to investigate this, was that what we were looking at was a written language, a system of communication, again, that was literally imprinted on the earth, and if we're right, it could not have been done by mere human beings. And that's the point that we're driving home here. It could not have been done. It is impossible to have been achieved by mere human beings, at least without being in possession of very advanced technology, because to even read these things, you have to be, in the upper atmosphere of the earth to even look down and see these things and to be able to read them. So there's something very unusual going on here, and that's a word I want to stress: unusual. This is not common. You're not going to pull up a map of the United States. You're not going to go on Google Earth and look over the United States or look over the Middle East or Africa and find these things. They're very unique to the Bolivian high plain, the Peruvian high plains. You might find some stuff similar in some areas. I personally have never seen it, but never in this quantity, in this density, as what you find when you're looking down over Bolivia. And really, I really encourage people. This has really not been covered much. Again, credit to David Flynn. He's the one who discovered this as soon as the high-resolution imagery was available from I believe it was even Google Earth he was using right when they came out with their high-definition satellite imagery back in early 2000 or around 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. He looked over this area. For some reason, he was drawn to this area, looked over, and discovered these geoglyphs. And so this is what we're dealing with, and the implications here are massive. The implications are massive. We show lots of different images, both stills and using Google Earth in our documentary, I think we do like a 15, 20-minute segment, maybe even a half an hour segment in our documentary, I can't remember, dealing just with the geoglyphs. We break them down, and we've upped the contrast on them so people can have a very clear view of these things. They're in high def in our documentary, and we show in our documentary, again, True Legends, Technology of the Fallen, which is out now. We show in this documentary, I'm certain, some geoglyphs that nobody has ever seen. I don't even think David Flynn saw them. I spent hours, days poring over the Google image files and on Google Earth, looking at these geoglyphs and discovering new ones. And the reason I believe that we've discovered some that most people have never before seen is because Google Earth is always getting better and better in terms of the resolution and also in terms of the three-dimensionality of their images. And just recently, the whole thing got boosted again. And so it's really, really astounding. I can't stress enough how bizarre, how alien these things are. And I'll kick it back to you guys, Doug, Joe, or Steve.
So I have a question, Tim, and Steve mentioned this at the beginning of the show, the language of the fallen angels. And Steve pointed out, and you pointed out, that these hieroglyphs, these geoglyphs have been cut out, and they've been done. It's been done from an aerial viewpoint, and apparently at a time when there were nothing that was supposed to be flying in the sky. Do you believe this was a communication tool for the fallen angels?
You're asking me personally?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. There's no way it could have been built by mere human beings, let's put it that way. I mean, either it was built by, you had to have an aerial perspective, so you either had to be flying in some kind of an airship, but even just to construct these things, they're so vast. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of square miles. And if you look on Google Earth, or you get our documentary and watch our documentary, you see the scale. You see buildings, complexes that are sitting right in the middle of some of these things, and they look like just little dots. And the geoglyphs are just sprawling all around them. So yes, you had to have had an aerial perspective to see this, number one. Number two, even if these were, let's just play with the idea for a moment that these had something to do with farming. Even if these geoglyphs had something to do with farming, it would have been a monumental task to construct them. I mean, we're talking about a vast network of raised mounds and, again, carved lines into the bedrock, and it would have been almost inconceivable, especially without modern implements. So either giant, in my
of the transhumanist is to enhance the human condition, the human intellect, human physiology. But in truth, what transhumanism is the transition between the human condition, between being human to a post-human condition, to being something other than human. So that's why you have the word transhuman. This is a process of transition. And what transhumanists are really advocating for is a post-human condition, a conscious evolution of the human species.
Can we get to a point where, as we were talking about the forbidden knowledge and forbidden history, can we really get the answers? I mean, I know you, Steve Quayle, people like Michael Cremo, L.A. Marzulli, doing the best you can to get the knowledge out to us, but it just seems like mainstream holds back. They don't cover these. Are we going to be able to get these answers out?
Well, I think we are to a limited extent. I think that, we have very powerful adversaries when we talk about scientific knowledge, when we talk about historical knowledge. The intellectual elite around the earth are very, very heavily invested in the Darwinian paradigm, and so they defend it, aggressively defend it. And any kind of artifacts or information that transgresses that paradigm is secreted away or is covered up or is destroyed. And that goes for all kinds of different themes, whether you're talking about giants, whether you're talking about ancient civilizations, whether you're talking about dinosaurs. in almost every field, you'll find this cover-up pervasive, because there is a concerted effort to propagate the Darwinian paradigm and to destroy any other paradigm that might challenge that.
Have you found that this effort to try to restore knowledge to people is going to be easy for you or difficult?
It's difficult. I mean, it's an uphill battle, because we're always sort of on the heels of some kind of important find. We always find ourselves to be one step behind these institutions that are covering things up. So the best we can do is bring to light the information that we've uncovered in the historical documents, do the kind of work you mentioned, L.A. Marzulli, that L.A. Marzulli is doing. I was at the symposium the other day with him at the Elongated Skull Symposium.
And you've got a great one coming up at Branson, but we'll talk about that later on tonight.
Yes, we do. So, I mean, the best we can do is try and produce scientific information and be honest with what we're finding, and just collect a body of work that is irrefutable, and that's what we're working to do.
How did you get involved with Steve, Tim? How did you both jump into this topic?
I actually lived in the Amazon for about 10 years of my life.
Really?
The Amazon basin of Peru. Yep. And so I was somewhat of a amateur explorer, adventurer, and I lived down there for a while. And then I ended up coming across some very interesting things while I lived in Peru, and became interested in giants and ancient forbidden knowledge and this sort of thing, megaliths and so forth. And when I moved back to the United States, I had encountered Steve Quayle's work concerning giants, his very famous, well-known work concerning giants. And so I ended up getting in contact with Steve and ultimately moving out to Bozeman, Montana, where I currently live and work with Steve Quayle in Gen 6 Productions. So, and Steve and I are doing all kinds of things together. As you mentioned, we did the True Legends films. We have 3 episodes out right now, and we have all kinds of very interesting things in the works right now.
There is a technology called GRIN, G-R-I-N. What does that stand for?
The GRIN technologies stand for, it's an acronym that stands for Genetics, Robotics, Artificial Intelligence, and Nanotechnology.
Aha.
And the GRIN technologies they're the primary technologies when you talk about the emergent technologies that are going to transform the human race. Though that is the collection of technologies that is at the forefront: genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology. And though the convergence, and these technologies are converging right now, they're coming together, and their convergence will absolutely and irreversibly redefine what it means to be a human being.
Is it good or bad to have these kinds of technologies?
Well, it all depends on how these technologies are used. I mean, we all applaud when technology is used to better the lives of human beings all over the earth. When our vets can get state-of-the-art prosthetics, and when we can cure different kinds of cancers, that's all laudable. And again, we all applaud those kinds of advancements in technology, and we're absolutely for those kinds of advancements. But the problem is that there's an agenda. And we talked about transhumanism. There's a transhumanist agenda to consciously evolve the human race into a post-human condition. I believe that this agenda is being motivated, is being perpetrated at the highest levels by the technocratic elite. I would call them the Luciferian technocratic elite. And their design, their ultimate goal is to fundamentally transform the human race into something other than human.
And they want to do it sooner than later, don't they?
Yes, and they're actively working towards this, and it's already happening. I mean, the development of the GRIN technologies, as you know, George, these technologies are progressing at such a rapid pace.
So fast.
it's almost impossible to keep up with
Yeah.
what's going on in even just one of these fields. But the GRIN technologies are just a collection of emergent technologies. There's all kinds of other technologies that are emerging, such as information technology, that are accelerating right now, that are going to fundamentally transform human society within the next
Let's
decade.
get into more of this work that you're doing, Tim, when we come back in a moment. Great artists. We highlight them for the first couple hours on the first Sunday of every month. As a matter of fact, some of the artists come by and watch our live stage shows, and they cheer us on. And we've got 3 coming up. There's going to be more for the rest of the year, but the most immediate ones are coming up in Salt Lake City, Utah, Scottsdale, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you very much. And we're the executive producer of these live events, of course, is Tom Danheiser. And let's talk first, Tom, if we can, about Salt Lake City. That's going to be a great event. That's March 10th, and tickets are starting to sell. We got a late start, but people are starting to really pick up on that event.
This show is going to be amazing. In fact, I just got off the phone with Nick Pope last week, and he's really excited to present some new information. And we'll also have Jason Martell and Daniel Brinkley. It's going to be a fun time, and don't imitate Elvis there, please.
I will only imitate Elvis in Las Vegas.
Fair enough.
Full information by going to coasttocoastam.com for Salt Lake City. You'll see right at the top we've added something very new. It just says events. Click that. It'll take you right there to their website, and you can pick your own tickets. You can even look at the seats that you want to sit in. Then, Thomas, we've got Scottsdale, Arizona on April 21st.
We do, and as you know, we're going to do something a little different. After our first 2 guests, we're going to do a UFO roundtable. We've never done this live before, so it's going to be 4 people, 4 experts, and yourself. Just kind of kicking around things, talking about, is disclosure, is it here, the recent things with Harry Reid and all those good things.
Go to events and click that, and you'll get to that theater, the Virginia G. Piper Theater. I'm going to give you a box office number just for the heck of it, too, 480-499-8587. Then on June 9th at the Silverton Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada, a live show. I have, since I was a little kid, wanted to do a live show in Vegas and sing on stage. Now, you might think I'm nuts, but that's what we're going to do.
Nah, this is going to be fun, and what I can say about this is go now, 702-263-7777. This will sell out, and it'll go fast. We're working with our affiliate up there. Great group of people, and the tickets are just going.
Viva Las Vegas.
Viva.
And we're going to come back more with Timothy Alberino as we talk more about this incredible technology that's coming down on us.
During the rectification of the Valdrani, the traveler came as a large and moving torb. Then, during the 3rd reconciliation of the last of the McKettrick supplicants, they chose a new form for him, that of a giant slore. Many Shubs and Zools knew what it was to be roasted in the depths of the slore that day, I can tell you.
By the way, and he's hosting a very, very important convention with Steve Quayle. I'll have him be talking about that shortly. It's called True Legends Conference. It's in Branson, Missouri. And if you've never been to Branson, you got to get there because it's a music capital. Andy Williams used to have his theater there, but you're going to have a great time out there, and you're going to have some fun. I want to read you a definition, then we're going to have Tim react to it. It's called biohacking, the activity of exploiting genetic material experimentally without regard, this is key here, to accepted ethical standards or for criminal purposes. Tim, what the heck is that all about?
Well, many people are not aware of the fact that there is a growing movement happening internationally all over the earth. It is a biohacking revolution. And what biohacking is, biohacking is a community of people who are using the most advanced and powerful gene editing technologies to make modifications to the genomes of biological creatures, including themselves.
Oh, geez.
In the basements, living rooms, kitchens of their own homes. That's what biohacking is.
What are they trying to do? Make, stronger people? Or what? Frankensteins? What do they want to do?
Well, yes. The biohackers there's different motivations among the biohackers. A lot of these guys are motivated by what's called personalized medicine, and biohackers are already coming up with new kinds of personalized medicine that targets specific problems in an individual's genome. So, in other words, if you have a specific genetic mutation, a biohacker can create a medicine that targets your specific problem, as opposed to taking the general medicine that is created to work for the masses of the populace. So, targeted medicine is a big deal among biohackers. And by the way, a lot of these guys are already curing themselves and their friends and their clients by making modifications to the human genome.
It seems, though, that it's illegal according to that definition, is it?
Well, it's not illegal yet. Right now, I don't think that the technology has outpaced the policy. So what's happening right now is these guys are using a technology called CRISPR-Cas9, which is a very powerful tool for gene editing.
Gene editing technology, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And so they can go in and make specific targeted modifications to the human genome. Now, this is the kind of technology that DARPA is using. This is the kind of technology that's being used in government and corporate labs all over the earth. And so what's happening is the biohacking revolution is taking the power of CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology out of the corporate labs, out of the military labs, and into the homes of otherwise average citizens. And these guys, a lot of these guys are not men of letters. These are men who are, in many cases, some of them never went to college, don't have a degree in biotechnology. They're learning how to do it online, and they're uploading their results for the greater good of the community, the biohacking community. And so basically, this is a form of it's almost like they're using the cloud, the internet cloud, to engineer the human genome.
Timothy, we had a bizarre story last week on the coasttocoastam.com website about a story from Florida. It was 100 years old story that 100 years ago, a scientist genetically bred, basically, a chimpanzee and a human, and came up with this anomaly that scared the living daylights out of him, and he killed it because he was just petrified of what he made. Is that real?
Well, I think it is real. We see that the Chinese just cloned a monkey, and that was in the open. So whatever we see these scientists doing in the open, I think we can just assume. I think we can infer that they're light years ahead in the corporate labs, and especially in the military labs, especially in the deep underground military labs. These guys, I think that we are very far advanced in cloning and genetic engineering, and I think we are doing all kinds of gross experimentation, especially when you talk about the Chinese and the Russians, and where the regulation is much less strident than in the United States. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Chinese have half chimpanzee, half human beings concoctions and somewhere in their labs and in the dark recesses of their military projects and so forth. So yes, I do think that's happening.
We could have islands like Dr. Moreau, where all kinds of bizarre creatures are being made out there, right?
Yes, and I think we do. And I think instead of islands, I think these things are under the ground. I think they're happening in the underground bases. That's why the corporate labs, many of these corporate labs are going underground, and that's why there are so many military installations under the ground where a lot of this kind of work is happening. And I mean, you're out of sight, out of mind, and therefore out of the purview and the jurisdiction in some cases of whatever government you happen to be working.
Would these be black ops programs, or could some governments be secretly funding these things?
I think it's both. We had last year, Vladimir Putin last year, in October of last year, was addressing a gathering of university students, and he forewarned that genetic engineering will soon lead to the creation of super soldiers, and he said, who will, quote, fight without fear, compassion, regret, or pain. And then he further suggested that this dangerous scenario might be worse than a nuclear bomb.
Jeez. I did get an email from some guy a couple months ago that said that Putin was a cross between an ostrich and a human.
Well, I can't confirm if he's a cross between an ostrich
or deny.
But I can say that I believe that Putin knows full well that the super soldier arms race is already well underway and has been for decades. It's a fact of life. I mean, if Russia's going to field super soldiers and China's going to field super soldiers, then you can
bet your bottom dollar
that the United States
Yep.
is going to field super soldiers.
Should people be afraid of the progression of all this technology we've been talking about tonight?
Yes, if we are interested in the preservation of humanity, we should take notice. In fact, that's what Dr. Leon Koss said some years ago. He actually said, quote, for anyone who cares about preserving our humanity, the time has come for paying attention. And he draws, I'll finish the quote, human nature itself lies on the operating table, ready for alteration, for eugenic and psychic enhancement, for wholesale redesign. In leading laboratories, academic and industrial new creators are confidently amassing their powers and quietly honing their skills, while on the street their evangelists are zealously prophesying a post-human future. That was penned by Dr. Leon Koss, who was the former chairman of President George W. Bush's Council on Bioethics. So, yes, people should be concerned. There's a lot of professional scientific guys out there, geneticists and so forth, that are very concerned about the wholesale redesign of the human race and what that might imply. And whether people are interested in this or not, whether they're concerned with this or not, it's happening. It's already happening. As I said before, the green technologies are now converging, and the inevitable result will be the redefining of the human species, the birth of a new human species. And I mean, how are we, those of us who decide that we don't want to enhance, we don't want to change our DNA, or we don't want to take the implants that are going to make us smarter, faster, stronger, and all these different technologies, the nanotechnologies, how are plain, regular old human beings going to compete in the markets and the battlefields of the future?
They can't.
They can't. And so isn't that then going to precipitate a subclass of human beings, i.e. you and I,
us,
who aren't enhanced?
What's the downside, though, for all of this in terms of what could physically go wrong? I'm concerned that all of a sudden they create something, a creature, something just goes absolutely horribly wrong. Is that possible?
That is a big concern across the board with all of these technologies. And in fact, it's a really big concern that people have when looking at the biohacking community, because what kind of new pathogens might these guys accidentally or intentionally create that we have no medicines for? Or if you create a super soldier, if you create some kind of a hybrid, what could the ramifications be if the genes of these creatures are inheritable? And that's a very real possibility.
They could wipe out humanity eventually.
They absolutely could. Within one generation, through germline genetic engineering, we could drastically alter the genetic architecture of the human race.
It's almost like a human GMO project.
That's exactly what it is. That's precisely what's going on. We started with our food, and then we started experimenting on animals. What do you think's next? It's us.
Oh.
We're going to be on the operating table, as Dr. Leon Koss.
And the guise is going to be, Timothy, you can live longer, you'll be healthier, you'll be happier, You may live to 180, but you'll look like you're 40. That's what they're going to say to trick us.
That's precisely what they're going to say. They're improving the human condition, when in reality their goal is not to improve the human condition. It is to consciously evolve the human race into a new condition, a new species, a post-human reality. And again, why this is so dangerous, this is going to create a subclass of human beings, just your good old-fashioned run-of-the-mill human being.
I don't see an upside here.
Well, frankly, I don't either. And I don't believe that humanity is wise enough to wield this technology without making a mess of it. And we know that profit drives the commercial realm, and we know that developing stronger weapons, the better weapons than your enemy, drives the military world. And so that's what's going on, and it's not going to stop. It is inevitable, the development of these technologies.
Yeah, it really is. Tim, for people who want more information on what you and Stephen Quayle are doing, can they send you emails and things like that through your website? Yes,
they can. They can get in contact with us through gen6.com. They can send us an email there and find out what we're doing and take a look at our films. And that's Stephen and I have our base at gen6.com.
What is germline genetic engineering?
Germline genetic engineering is engineering of the human genome at the germline level, the embryonic level, and the consequences of germline genetic engineering are perhaps the most frightening, at least to me. And the reason why is because, as I said before, you could drastically change. You can modify the genetic architecture of the human species within one generation via germline genetic engineering. This is the kind of genetic engineering, of gene editing, that is heritable. In other words, a genetic change can be made in me. If a doctor goes or a scientist goes into my genetic code, into my genome, and they make some kind of a change, whatever it may be, whether it's the color of my eyes, whether it's getting rid of some kind of a mutation that's causing a certain kind of cancer, and they do it on the embryonic level, then that genetic change can be inheritable and will be inheritable by my successive generations, by my children and their children. And that sounds great, and it can be great if you're talking about editing out mutations that lead to cancer and all kinds of other diseases.
Right, but that's the trick. We're going to do all these great things for you. Meanwhile, under the table, they're doing all these horrendous things.
Exactly. Or what if a modification is made, for example, that changes something in the human brain that makes us more pliable for political reasons?
Timothy, you've been out to dinner and you've seen people sitting at a table and they don't look at each other. They're texting somebody. Maybe they're texting each other. Who knows? But is that destroying part of what you've been talking about tonight?
Yes. I think we're being intentionally desensitized as human beings to the human condition. And I think that social media is the biggest culprit here. That it's detaching us from human interaction, and this is a big problem because we've been talking about these emerging technologies that are going to drastically that are going to redefine what it means to be a human being, and so the social media, it's sort of laying the groundwork for humanity to accept those technologies because we're already being dehumanized. In terms of the way that we interact with each other, in terms of our social skills.
Yep.
We're losing touch with the trademarks, the social trademarks that make us human, and pretty soon we're going to be abandoning the very genetic trademarks that make us human, or at least that process is going to begin. So it's sort of a 1-2 punch. This is the first punch is to detach us from one another, from human interaction, and from the very sense of humanity. And it's a philosophical question and that a lot of people are considering right now. I mean, I'm sure your audience is aware of the studies that have been surfacing concerning the damage that being addicted to social media can do to a person.
Oh, my God, yeah. Even Facebook people and executives are saying too much is not good.
It's very bad, in fact. It's creating all kinds of problems. As I said, especially for young people, social problems, psychological problems, depression, these are the ramifications that are already occurring, that we already know are very real. And there's all kinds of psychologists out there who are calling for Facebook and Twitter and these other social platforms to stop targeting young people, for example. And because, as you well know, George, Facebook targets our kids.
Oh, yeah, that's their audience.
And they're not just looking to interest your kids, in the traditional sense, like a TV program to capture your attention so that they can make money with the commercials. This is much more devious. This is targeted. Facebook and Twitter and so forth is targeted to addict your children. And it's very devious, and there's a lot of people now who are waking up to what's been happening. And in some cases, sadly, it's too late, especially for the millennials, who many of whom literally would go into withdrawal if they couldn't access their Facebook account anymore or Twitter.
Oh, or didn't have their smartphone with them. They'd go crazy.
Exactly. And again, what's happening is it's dehumanizing us and on a very fundamental level, the way that we interact with one another. And it's a social dehumanization of the human race, and I believe that it's preempting what's coming next, which is the biological dehumanization of the human race. And again, I believe this is an agenda. It's a devious agenda that's coming from the technocratic elite that would love nothing more than to turn us in.
Help you boys?
You got any white bread?
Yes.
I'll have some toasted white bread, please.
You want butter or jam on that toast, honey?
No, ma'am. Dry. Got any fried chicken?
Best damn chicken in the state.
Bring me 4 fried chickens and a Coke.
You want chicken wings or chicken legs?
4 fried chickens and a Coke. And some dry white toast, please.
You all want anything to drink with that?
No, ma'am. A Coke.
Be up in a minute.
Friday.
Okay. Would the good be able to outweigh the bad, Timothy?
Well, all of the goodness and light of humanity could not stop the detonation of Little Boy, the nuclear bomb, over Hiroshima, or of Fat Man that was detonated over Nagasaki and obliterated those 2 cities. So the human race is on an inevitable path of self-destruction. And unfortunately, I come from a biblical worldview. So for me, ultimately, yes, there's a lot of hope coming in the future based on my biblical worldview. But things are going to get really, really dark first. And so, this is a function of what's called the technological imperative. And the technological imperative, which is also known as the inevitability thesis, says that it posits that once a technology is introduced into society, what follows is the inevitable development of that technology. To put it another way, when set into motion, the developmental progression of any useful technology is unavoidable, unstoppable, and irreversible, even if it poses a catastrophic risk to society itself, e.g. the atomic bomb that I referenced. And so these technologies are going to be developed until they're no longer useful, until the developmental progression no longer has a purpose. They will be. And what we see in human society is that where does the development of these technologies take place? They take place in the commercial market, and they take place in the private sector, and they take place in the military sector. And I don't trust the corporations to use these technologies for good, and I don't trust the military to do it either. So unfortunately, I think ultimately We need to be aware of what's going on. We need to push back. But here, it's a very simple question. Is the light and love of humanity going to get all of these young people unaddicted from Facebook? I don't think so. So that would be my answer.
All right, let's go to the phones again. Trey is on a boat in Tennessee. Welcome to the show. Hi, Trey.
Hi, George and Tim. Look, Tim, I'm a big fan of yours. Been into your work since 2014, and really enjoying the True Legend series. I had a couple of questions. The first one is, do you think that all the geoengineering that's going on is trying to make the environment more easier for these entities that they're trying to turn loose to maybe live in the environment? And also, I heard that there's a legend that whenever King David killed Goliath, that he buried his skull in a hill that we call Golgotha, the place of the skull, meaning Goliath of God. If there's any link between that and the bones of giants being buried in mounds. And I'll just hang up and listen to your reply.
All right, go ahead, Tim.
Well, to the first question, I do suspect, as does Steve, that the geoengineering that's taking place around the Earth is to change the environmental conditions on planet Earth that are more suitable for the entities that we believe are going to start showing up. So yes, I do suspect that. Now, I can't prove that. That's just a suspicion of mine. And to the second question, the mounds are almost universally associated with giants around the Earth. There's some kind of a link that doesn't necessarily mean that the giants are buried in the mounds, but in some cases they are. I mean, you can look at the mounds in North America, which famously contained, in many cases, the bones of giants, even within the records of the Smithsonian Institution itself. And the same thing can be said of the mounds in South America. The natives believed in South America that the giants, when they were killed, and most of the natives account a great flood that killed the giants, that when they died, their bodies turned into mounds, or that mounds were raised over their bones. So obviously, and you can find myths and legends like this all over the earth pertaining to the bones of giants being buried in mounds, and in the case of the natives of North and South America, they reverenced these mounds. They worshiped these mounds precisely because the bones of the giants could be found within them.
All right, next up, let's go to Thomas in La Jolla, California. Hi, Thomas, go ahead.
Hi, George. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure, you're very
and
welcome.
Tim, you and Steve Quayle are doing great work, and kudos and high praise.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, you were talking about biohacking, but, there's been rumors and speculations over the last 30, 40 years that nation states, through military, black ops, etc., have been developing genetic bioweapons that are specifically, they can be targeted towards subraces, like anybody of the Nordic subrace or African or Arab or Oriental, that type of thing. Or they can be targeted toward the sexes, like you could target a genetic vector that could wipe out 95% of the men in a country, but not the women. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I was wondering, again, we've heard of, speculation, rumors, allegations, but are there genetic weapons that have been developed, just sort of like the atomic bomb, but this is like the genetic atomic bomb, so to speak, that targets genetic either subraces or, the sexes, that type of thing?
My answer to that would be yes, I believe there are. I have no definitive proof to back that statement up, but I can say this, I know that is a concern of the U.S. military, and that they have actually voiced that concern. And so they're not going to voice a concern over something that is totally impractical. So yes, I absolutely believe personally that we do have weapons that can target certain races, that are designed to affect certain sequences within the genome, that distinguish people of a certain family, of a certain race, of a certain region, and that is a very, very dangerous technology. I mean, in the past, the Nazis, we think that the Nazis perfected, we always hear that the Nazis perfected genocide. Well, imagine if the Nazis had a tool like that. They wouldn't have needed the concentration camps. They could have simply unleashed some kind of a biological agent that targeted particular sequences within the genomes of the Jewish population worldwide, and could have exterminated the Jews all over the earth, rather than just in Europe. So yes, that's a very dangerous scenario, and I'm sure that the militaries, not only of the United States but of other nations, are very much aware of that potential catastrophe, of that potential weaponization of genetic engineering. And again, I believe that yes, those weapons already exist.
Timothy, Jeff Bezos of Amazon likes the idea of artificial intelligence, wants us to move forward faster. Meanwhile, PayPal's Elon Musk and physicist Stephen Hawking both say AI is highly likely to destroy humans. Be careful. So what do you think?
Well, I agree with the latter assessment that yes, it would be disastrous for us to create strong artificial intelligence ultimately. I mean, look what's already happening, George, with the weak artificial intelligence that we have now, with these algorithms that Amazon is using, that Google is using, and they're using these algorithms, which is a form of artificial intelligence, to collect information about us. Basically, this weak artificial intelligence knows everything about us already, things that we don't want Google and Amazon and these other corporations to know. So artificial intelligence is already being used to invade the privacy and to undermine the human race. What will happen when we develop strong artificial intelligence? In fact, that scenario is predicted in Professor Degueris's book, The Artilect War. He sees a war breaking out in the future between those who want to develop strong artificial intelligence and those who do not. And so, again, there can be limited benefits from artificial intelligence, certainly. And I'm not against those benefits and using weak artificial intelligence wisely. But unfortunately, these things are not being used wisely. They're being used again. Artificial intelligence is already being weaponized against us, against consumers, in a very limited way right now. So why would we want these companies to further develop it?
I don't even like cars that drive themselves.
I don't either. I don't. And you know what, George? I don't think they're going to poll us and see if the American populace wants to have to deal with driverless semi-trucks. I think they're just going to do it, and we're going to have to deal with it because it's about profit. It's about and what does a technocrat? And by the way, technocrat is an elite group of people who are using technology. It's a scientific elite that use technology to control the masses. So what they want to do is to use these technologies to, first of all, profit off of us, and second of all, control us.
Right, and they don't want to have to pay for truck drivers, which are the backbone of our country.
Exactly. So that's a very real scenario that is going to be developing in the next decade for sure. I mean, they're already moving forward with driverless cars, and even in the face of the fact that most of us don't like the idea. They don't care. They don't want to pay human drivers. They want to make more money, and they want to force us into the technological age of strong artificial intelligence.
We are with Timothy Alberino right now as we talk about true legends and giants. And how tall do you think they were, Tim?
Well, they were anywhere from 9 to 30 feet.
30 feet?
Yeah, I mean, and according to the historical records that we've been able to find in the myths and legends, the tombs and so forth. So the majority of them were probably between 9 and 12 feet tall, and there's a difference between the giants that existed in a pre-flood context and those that existed in a post-flood context. The giants in a post-flood context were much smaller than those who roamed the earth in the days before the Great Flood.
And because of the Great Flood, is that why we really can't find the skeletons of most of them?
No, I think that the bones have been discovered.
Well, some of them have, but it's not like a graveyard, is it?
No, I haven't ever come across anything like that. But I'm not even sure that when you talk about really, 15 plus tall giants, I don't even know that we would be able to recognize those kinds of bones. I mean, who would ever think that would be, they come across a massive femur like that would think that would be the femur of a human being?
I think it was a dinosaur or something.
Exactly. I think that most people would think this is a dinosaur, it's a mammoth or something.
Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told it to you.
Which tells us of a bizarre of a bizarre occurrence in which the sons of God, the Benai Elohim, the Watchers, as the extra biblical texts call them, descended to the earth and took human women as wives, copulated with them, progenerating a race of hybrid entities in the earth. That was the first hybrid age, and so that's the pre-flood, the world that existed, the old world that was destroyed, that was annihilated in the flood, was a world of hybrids. It was a time in which the gods were mingling with men. It was the golden age of yore, when the gods mingled with the children of men. And except contrary to the myths and legends, it was not a time. It was not a good time for the human race. It was a time in which the human race was literally being devoured in some circumstances, and so that's the reality. That's the dynamic of the pre-flood world. It's not just that men were evil; it's that men were hybridized, and in fact, the Bible says that all life was corrupted in the earth. All flesh, I should say, was corrupted in the earth, and we believe very strongly that alludes to a genetic corruption. And now we're entering into the new hybrid age, the very days in which we live, in which the human race is again facing mass hybridization because of the technologies that we've been talking about. So we believe that we're in a time in which we're going to see the reoccurrence, Genesis 6 2.0, if you will. So yes, that's exactly what our production company is predicated upon, is the reality of Genesis 6. And to the question concerning the Luciferian scientists, most scientists are not what I would not consider most scientists Luciferian. Most scientists are very dedicated to their particular field, to their particular field of study, and are just working hard to for example, the scientists that are developing medicine and even genomic medicine are doing so with good intentions. But the problem is that you have to look above them to the benefactors. You always have to follow the money to the top, the benefactors. And in many cases, you're going to find that the benefactors are pharmaceutical companies and are globalists and technocratic, and the technocratic elite, these individuals I've been citing this throughout the program tonight. And these guys at the very top echelons subscribe to a Luciferian doctrine. And a Luciferian doctrine is one that exalts humanity above God, and one that seeks eternal life, and also to control humanity, to forcibly control humanity and force humanity into conscious evolution. And most scientists are not engaged in this agenda.
I agree with you, Tim. Most are not. There's a handful they probably are.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Let's go next to Kevin in Chico, California. Hi, Kev. Thanks for calling.
You there?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, George and Timothy, for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Timothy, you're doing pretty close work with Steve Quayle.
Yes.
You're familiar with the Hagman Report?
Yep.
Yes, I am.
Yes. So my question really, the United States, the technology, our power really increased after World War II as far as technology. So my question is kind of interesting. It has to do with the Obama administration compared to the Trump administration. As far as advancing this technology, is the bio and the tinkering of the AI and the bio and all that.
Who's pushing? What administration is pushing this the most? I think it's about the same, Tim, isn't it?
I don't really know. I think that we talk about the deep state. Well, let's not forget about the military-industrial complex. That's part of that deep state, and the military-industrial complex is really uncontrollable at this point by any president of the United States. These are individuals, high-ranking military people who have been occupying their posts for many years, and are doing things in the dark that, frankly, the President of the United States doesn't even have the clearance to look into. I mean, you can talk about the deep underground military bases, the reverse engineering of the extraterrestrial craft, and so on, the development of super soldier projects. Don't assume that the presidents of the United States have any authority or clearance to even inquire.
Or knowledge.
Of these programs, exactly. I think that's a common assumption, and we need to understand that the President of the United States is in many ways a political figurehead. It's the military-industrial complex really is controlling much of this and has no oversight whatsoever.
San Antonio, Texas, it's Manuel with us. Hello, Manuel. Go ahead.
Hello, hi.
Hey there.
To you, George and Tim. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
But what I wanted to say today or this morning is that you're exactly right. What's going on? My grandfather told me on one of his deathbeds that if we elected Nixon, he was going to be the worst president and a terror to the United States. Okay. Now another thing that he also that I found out is that all that Ebola viruses that they're made of, the biogenic, they store them all at NORAD. And I got this from a security guard who used to be in the Air Force, who used to work for, he was the military police, and he used to guard in NORAD. And he said there's sections inside there. It's like, it goes all the way down, full of all kind of biochemical weapons and nuclear weapons, and of course that Ebola virus.
You might have been right. Some of those old time military types, Timothy, had a lot of knowledge.
Yes, and that's always a danger because we know that first world nations are developing and have developed biological weapons, and of course are weaponizing some of the worst diseases that we can get our hands on, including Ebola, among others, the Black Plague even. And this is one of the a constant danger that we face, just like nuclear war. Biological warfare is a very real and present danger.
Well, it sure is. And can it be stopped or slowed down? Is there anything, what do you recommend the average person do?
Well, I think that we have to be aware of these things. I think that's where you start. You have to. A lot of people are willfully ignorant, just going about their lives, and as we mentioned before, are just on Facebook and Twitter and social media. I think that we need to become aware of these things, arm ourselves with the knowledge of what's happening in the world, keep our eyes open, and then you can do practical things like avoid some of these vaccinations. And have the understanding that they're not always, these pharmaceutical companies and military industrial complex and so forth are not always looking out for your best interest.